So Dr. Peter is the founder and managing director of COOJ Mental Health Foundation. They run a suicide prevention program in Goa, and he's also a consultant psychiatrist with his own private practice. He's initiated programs in psychosocial rehabilitation of people with psychological disabilities, as well as geriatric and dementia care. He's got no shortage of awards and recognition to his name, as well as the COOJ Foundation, actually. You're the past president of the Psychiatric Society of Goa, member of the International Association of Suicide Prevention, and you are also, you've received the Bagadia Award from them as well. So we're in perfect hands today to discuss these topics. We've also got Chrissy, who will be joining us shortly as well. And she has her master's in clinical psychology and has worked with various hospitals in Mumbai, including the New Horizons Child Development Center, and she's now working very closely with Dr. Peter at the Mental Health Foundation in Goa in the psychosocial rehabilitation program. So I'm going to go ahead and just add Chrissy to the chat one more time to see if she can join us. If not, we can get started. So why don't you tell us a bit about COOJ to begin with, Dr. Peter, and then we can go from there and kind of break it down further.
Okay. Yeah, so COOJ completes 20 years of its existence, and it actually started off when I was a young resident in the psychiatric hospital. And what I realized from my training and my experience at the hospital was that people with severe mental illnesses were just given primarily pharmacological treatment, medical treatment, but there was nothing beyond that. There was no kind of, taking them and helping them to walk into life and help them to build up their full potential. There was absolutely, I would say absolutely there was no rehab services at all. Okay, Chrissy is just telling me that, which is... Yeah, she's not being able to get through, but I'll continue. Yeah, so there was no rehab service. But that's when I said, we need, Goa's a small state with, at that time, almost around 14 to 20,000 people with severe mental illness. And I said, yeah, this is the right time to start off a foundation that will help to bridge in the gap between the need and the existing services. And I said, wow, we're going to start this rehab center, and with 14 to 20,000, that's what the statistics say, we are going to be full crazy from day one, that's what I assumed. But I was totally wrong. It was like, it took us almost 6 months to get our first client. And that's when, during those 6 months, was actually a brainstorming time for us, when we realized that there were many factors involved in the understanding of what we were trying to do, what mental health was, and how do you differentiate mental health from mental illness. As soon as you talk about the word mental, it directly goes towards the illness aspect. People forget about mental well-being, which is, if we want to live today, if you want to have a goal today, if you want to have a career today, if you have a focus, like the whole, as I was talking to you the other day, and I realized what you're doing through the Jugaad community, it's excellent work, but it needs a mindset. Absolutely. It needs a healthy mindset. Right now we're going through a pandemic, right now we're going through a cycle. It needs resilience. Yeah. It needs a lot of mental factors to actually live in today's world and to be focused and to achieve your goals. And people really didn't understand that. They assume mental health to be something like madness and everything negative about it. So our first job at that time was to break these stereotypes and of these odd understandings. And I'm telling you, it is a process. Till today, we are still breaking it, but it's a lot more easier, at least with the younger population. They recognize the signs and symptoms, and they're not afraid to talk about that, and that's really something very good. But if you look at society, there is a shift. I wouldn't say no, there is a shift, but there's still the strong roots of stigma attached to illnesses. So that's what COOJ's first work was, to set up the rehab center. And actually, I wanted Chrissy to talk a little bit more about our work, but when she joins in, hopefully she does, she can talk about the rehab center, because she works in that center closely. Then in 2012, we realized that the rate of suicide in Goa was alarmingly high. Being a small state, a very educated state, economically much better off than the rest of India, our suicide rate was much, much higher than the national average. And there was really no formal suicide prevention program in place in our state. And that's where we started off the suicide prevention program. There are many elements to this program, but we can come to that later.
Yeah.
And in 2014, again, to my visits to several old age homes, I realized that even though I was called because those elderlies were depressed, I realized they weren't really depressed as much as they were lonely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were isolated, they were understimulated, they were just existing and waiting for that day to come when they're no more. And all they would do is pray 24 hours. Like, you can't do that. I mean, even if you're 60, 70, 80, 90, you can still bring meaning into your life. And that's
Absolutely.
when we said, enough is enough. We have to set up some kind of interventions, even basic interventions, into these homes.
Mm-hmm.
To give them a purpose,
Yeah.
to give them some sort of, a dignity, to remind them of their childhood, just remind them what it means to laugh, to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And from there stem the other elements of our program where we saw, okay, there are lots of people with dementia, and so then it became the geriatric and dementia program. Right. So we have 4 programs going on, as I said, the psychosocial rehabilitation, the suicide prevention program, the geriatric and dementia care program, and a continuous, which is the community mental health program. Yeah, so these are the 4 pillars of our work.
So that's awesome. So very meaningful work. And I think like when you probably started COOJ, you've seen that evolution of how the dialogue is just getting louder and louder. So let's break down some of those pillars. We're also going to take questions as and when they come through from the audience. So we'll go through each of the pillars, but actually let's answer this question first because you just brought it up. So I think it's a good question. How do you differentiate between mental health and the mental mindset in this context of the pandemic? Especially me from Nepal have been seeing a lot of like the mental health versus mindset. How do you differentiate between the two?
Mental health and mental mindset. I didn't understand that.
Maybe I think you might be alluding to what you were saying about mental health versus illness. Can you clarify the difference?
Yes, I think it's the mental health versus illness. And see, how I like to explain this is if you look at the body. Welcome, Prissy. Hi. So if you look at your physical body, we have several organs, right? So we have the eyes, the nose, we have the kidneys, your heart. You've got various organs. So similarly in the mind, there are various aspects to the mind. Yeah? So you've got your attention, you've got your concentration, the ability to concentrate and focus, your ability to judge what is right from wrong, to make decisions, to perceive things. If I wave my hand, right? If I wave my hand, it could be I'm saying hello to Chrissy, or I could be saying bye to Chrissy,
Yeah.
And if Chrissy interprets this wave as a bye, she'd be like, bloody hell, so angry with me. I just ended and he said, get out,
Yeah.
And so what of our frustrations come because of misperception. So perceive is very, very important. Then we have our memory, our ability to, as I said, judge what is right from wrong, our decision-making processes. So we've got aspects. Our mood, very, very important is our mood state and our emotions, our ability to think, thinking. So all these are inherent to us. But one or more of these could go and tip off into the area where it's beginning to affect our life adversely. For instance, take an example of a brilliant student. Okay, like I remember when I attended my MBBS 25-year reunion, and it was amazing to see all our friends. But what we realized there is not everyone who got gold medals and were intellectuals actually was successful in life. some of them had anger issues, so they always said this is right and it cannot be the other way. And it's okay when you're studying because you're just you and your books and your teacher, and you can score a gold. But when it comes to life and practical living, you need to build up on a lot of skills, and you have to be in control of your emotions. So if people are going to have anger outbursts all the time, and it's going to affect their lives, this could actually be a hindrance to them. And this could be tipping off into the illness part. As I said, if someone is having a problem with perception, suppose he's always perceiving that, even though his spouse smiles, suppose his wife smiles at another friend, and he's always suspicious of that smile, he's always putting hidden meanings into that smile, he's definitely having a problem. Or if someone is always just feeling sad, he's generally a happy person, but suddenly just feeling sad all the time. And that sadness, okay, there may be a reason to it or there may be no reason to it. But it's a pervasive sadness which is taking over his life. That could be tipping off. Now, one thing we have to understand that not all of us, see, mental health is a range. Like, for instance, for me, maybe my thought process is good, my emotional capacity is good, but I know for a fact that my memory sucks. And really it's because Chrissy reminded me, Doc, it's already time at ready. And I said it. So I was here on time. But I know I have a memory problem, and I know that I have a concentration problem. So in college also, I had to keep reading and reading and reading the same paragraph again and again. But today, as I learn it as a psychiatrist, I know possibly I have ADD.
Yeah.
So it's important that we reflect on our lives, reflect on ourselves, and understand ourselves. Because if very often people just say, I'm not being successful. But I think first step of success is to know yourself, to know what are your strengths and weaknesses, and to see which of those weaknesses that you can work on, and maybe those weaknesses that you just cannot work on, and you have to accept that this is what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. So go ahead.
Yeah. So when I say mental illness is when a part of your mind begins to affect you adversely, where it's now taking over your regular daily functioning, your social capacity, your interactions with your friends, with your family, it's affecting your work, then yes, you need to get an assessment done. It could be a mental illness.
Love it. So let's go, and hopefully we're able to get Chrissy to comment, because I know she works in the psychosocial program. Let's talk a bit about rehab. Now, I think this could be my own ignorance, and I know I'm not alone in thinking about rehab in this way. But growing up, the only thing I've seen of rehab is people with addiction, right? Going to rehabilitation centers, and I think it's obviously much broader than that. And there are many different kinds of people with different kinds of illnesses who can actually seek help and benefit from rehab. So can you speak a bit about what is rehab? Why should you go? What is the need? Who needs to go? Just cover the basics of Rehab 101 for the audience here.
So rehabilitation is, and rehabilitation not necessarily has to mean that you have to be ill to be rehabilitated, We who supposedly are normal, okay, for me, I know because I have a concentration problem, okay, I could even just rehabilitate myself for my concentration problem. So I do a series of exercises to help build my concentration. Yeah, so rehabilitation is a process which works on your disabilities, okay, to improve them. Yeah. So so it could be across the board, across the spectrum. Yes, what you're saying is right. Rehab in terms of people with addictions, and that works fantastically. And there are different types of rehab programs. The one which I have worked for many years is the 12-step program, where you go through a series of steps. When you're having a kind of an addictive problem, and the addiction doesn't need to be only a drug or an alcohol or a substance. It could mean even a rehab program for someone who's addicted to their phones, addicted to Instagram, social media, eating, telly, it could be anything, If you, as soon as you take taking over your life, and today gaming addiction is huge, okay?
Yep.
Uh, and perversions and whatever it is. You need to get into a process of getting back to normal, So that is playing your excessive, right? In our work of psychosocial interventions for people with severe, I won't say severe, but with a mental illness, is now let's look at it. How do I put it? So say someone with schizophrenia, okay, and schizophrenia is a chronic mental illness which affects primarily your thoughts, and your perceptions.
Yep.
You may have delusions and hallucinations. Delusions are fixed false beliefs, and hallucinations are basically, for those who really don't understand the true meaning of it, it is perceiving things without a sensation. So I may see a child in front of me, but there is no child. I may hear a voice when it's actually spoken. So if I have these hallucinations. Now, these are the primary symptoms of the illness. But because these hallucinations are constantly working on you, it affects the other areas of your mind also, like your ability to focus, and therefore your memory. You may forget things. It will affect your mood state. And if you understand schizophrenia, a lot of the chronic mental illnesses actually start off in young adulthood, when the person is actually in college, when trying to work on their careers and their dreams, and and it starts off very early on, and it actually it robs you of who you were as a person and your own dreams. And so in rehabilitation, first we have to tell them it's okay. It's okay. And then we see all the areas which have been affected, all the deficits, and we'll start working on one deficit at a time. So social skills training is one aspect where we teach them now, because sometimes because the illness, they have forgotten how to just be in an environment of people, in a social setup. So we would train them again how to smile, how to greet someone, how to behave at a party, how to behave at a social function, how to communicate. Basics, we'll train them back again. Cognitive remediation, where we work on those areas of the brain that need exercising. Like, for instance, I told you in terms of concentration or memory. Or if they're having delusions, then we counsel them to help them to understand that because the delusion they fix, but how to cope with this delusion. So if you feel that someone is following you, then we teach them and we train them how to deal with that fear that someone is following them,
Yeah.
So exactly. So in rehabilitation is a process, and it can take sometimes years. We help people to complete their education, to get jobs in spite of their disabilities. That is also part of the rehab process. Yeah.
I love it. I think there's, we as a society, we understand therapy, or we're getting closer to understanding the whole concept and seeking help. But I think when it comes to, yesterday we were speaking to the Mithram Foundation and talking about helplines. When it comes to helplines, rehab, I think there's still so much stigma around it. And so what have you seen personally in the past, the past couple of years that you've been doing this? What have you seen in terms of the stigma around rehab? Are more people seeking help? What can we do to encourage people in our lives who are really struggling to sort of continue reaching their potential? How can we encourage them to seek help or consider rehab as an option?
So it's a very interesting question, because this is a question I keep asking myself also. In terms of rehab, you can have it in two setups. Okay, one is in a residential setup, and one is in a non-residential setup.
Right.
Now, what we have seen over so many years is there's a huge demand for residential setups. And one of the reasons is because the families are so burnt out that they just want this person out. They can't handle them in the house, and especially if they're very symptomatic and they are probably maybe destructive, or their delusions are very strong. So in a space where they would require maybe hospitalization, they actually put in these rehab centers, and then with many of them, they actually kept there for years. And that is a very sad, because the whole the whole idea of deinstitutionalization, where we are supposed to take people out of mental hospitals and into the community, was so that people would get that respect and their dignity, and the community would enable them to live in their own space. But we're seeing a different kind of institutionalization, which is back into rehab centers, and these rehab centers are becoming long stay homes. What we do is non-residential. So where people actually come from home to our setup and they go back. Now, this needs a lot more motivation, a lot more efforts from families, because not everyone is mobile, not everyone has the confidence to travel alone from their homes to the center and go back. So this is what we train them. We say, see, we don't have the confidence, but this is what we expect. Our goal is to be independent, is to make your child or your ward as independent as possible to build up his complete potential. But then not every family and not every person has got that level of confidence. So it's more a struggle in a non-residential center rather than a residential center, I would say. That's something that we have observed. Stigma, to some extent, plays a factor, because there's a huge contrast between, like, so I'll give an example. Suppose a person was studying engineering,
right?
And in his second or third year of engineering, he developed the illness, and then there was a kind of a downhill. Expects it to be kind of an engineering setup, or it to be a much higher level setup. But when he sees things like people are making paper bags and people are doing vocational work with their hands, he says, but I am not like them. I am much better. But in reality, he's actually worse than them, and they're better off, So for him to understand and accept his level of ability has actually gone down is one of the struggles that we have. Yeah.
Very helpful.
So,
one of the questions on the chat, just while we're on the topic of rehab centers, is what are the treatment methods that are used in rehab? Can you quickly comment on, sort of at a high level, what kind of treatments can you expect at a rehab program?
So if we are looking at a rehab program now, it depends on rehab for what, but I will look at the work we are doing in the rehab for people with chronic mental illness. So definitely he has to be under a psychiatrist. Okay, so the medical work goes on with the psychiatrist. And once he comes, we do a baseline assessment of his ability level and the areas that we have to work on. So, and generally the works happen at an individual level and a group level. We also work with the person, and we also work with his family, because we do understand that he has to go back into this family, and if there are enabling factors in the family, we need to take care of those also. The family and us have to be on board with the same goals. So, as I said earlier, we work on the disability. So we'll work on his social skills, we'll work on his cognitive skills, we'll work on his vocational skills. We use therapies like cognitive remediation, where we do those kind of cognitive exercises to build on the various parts of the brain that are kind of affected. We use group therapy, and it's actually very basic, but it needs to be thought of. So we have a kind of schedule. So it starts with, the thing is to create a structure, because in their lives there is no structure. So the whole thing of waking up in the morning, coming to the center and getting into a structured program itself is therapeutic. That number one is it. Then, so our day starts off with exercises, with newspaper reading, with yoga. Then we either have a dance therapy session or music therapy. Then we get into the vocational work that goes on. Depending on their level of ability, the vocational work is kind of programmed for them. Then people are taken in for their cognitive remediation work, for personal one-on-one counseling. Then we have other activities like cooking, gardening, just basically developing skills, motor skills, fine motor skills, as well as gross motor skills. Then recreation time, so that they get a chance to, just be themselves and have fun, because very often they've forgotten how to have fun, and that also they are building on skills. If we play carom, then they have fine motor skills. If we play ball, then it's gross motor skills. Then we have them to make presentations, so that again they're spending time on the computer, they are learning PowerPoint. We have formed a little club for them. It's called the Friends Club, where they manage the club themselves. So there is a whole hierarchy of the president, the vice president, the treasurer, the secretary. And they have meetings once a month, and they plan out activities for themselves. So they plan out probably a trip to the mall, a cooking trip, they prepare a meal, or a picnic, or whatever. So they they learn how to manage themselves. So that is another so giving them various opportunities, we help them to develop these skills, and we all look at the positives and we try to ignore the negatives, but even if there are negatives, it's like how we can work on them. So that's very important.
That's super helpful. I think this has definitely given everyone an overview of what rehab is and what they can expect, because I think in my mind, it's always been something that is for, very extreme scenarios, and it's not something I could use to seek help if I'm going through a difficult period or I'm, struggling to get my life on track. One of the questions I want to ask you, Doctor, is so COOJ provides support for families of individuals, experiencing mental illness through support groups that happen periodically. And I love that, because I feel like there is very little that we know about how to seek help as someone living with someone who's living with a mental illness, or someone who loves someone with a mental illness. So what sort of resources are available to them? And can you speak a bit about, what the family goes through and how we can support them or seek help? I know one of the questions on our chat right now is, how can families participate or help in treatment? Sometimes dealing with personal things, it's very difficult. And then you've got your own set of challenges you're trying to deal with, which can make it messy. So can you speak a bit about that angle? Because I would think that, in South Asian society, I think the family piece is really huge and a contributor to, the whole scenario. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yes. And if we see from a South Asian perspective, families are a protective factor. And therefore, a lot of the rehab that we talk in rehab centers actually takes place within the families, So, for instance, just tasking clients or our patients to do basic work at home is also rehab. It's also giving them an opportunity to feel useful. But yes, families who have we have different types of families. Families are very supportive, very learned, understand the concepts of a mental illness, give the clients the space to grow, and have a better sense of well-being themselves and are resilient.
Right.
But those are very rare families. Okay, most families are actually crushed and burdened by the mental illness. One we have to understand that since a lot of mental illnesses run in families, there may be a parent who also is suffering from the illness. There may be another child. Like I know a family where they have 3 children, and surprisingly, all 3 are medical professionals, but all 3 have got a mental illness. In fact, all 3 have got schizophrenia.
Yeah.
So for the parents to first accept that all 3 children have a mental illness is very tough. Then we had to analyze the parents, and we realized that one of the parents also had an illness. So for a parent, which is undiagnosed, for a parent to have an illness, to then supporting 3 kids with the illness becomes very tough.
Yeah.
Normal and natural emotions that families go through are guilt. Did I cause this? Because people will blame, and especially people blame in India, a lot of them, they blame the women, the mothers. You caused this. If you were a better mother, if you were a better human being, this would not have happened. So that blame is there. The guilt is there. Have I done something wrong? Just caused this. Then just the whole pressure of caring versus looking after their other roles, because people have got multiple roles. And as long as they were living in joint families, they had a chance, there were other members to look after. But as we're getting into nuclear families, and people are burdened that they have to go to work, plus they have to look after their person at home. It just stretches them out a lot, you know.
Yeah.
So that burnout is huge, and that burnout can be a factor for things not really being well at home. So through our interventions, first we just chat with the families. We try to understand where they come from, what is their mental health, and so we do it at first at an individual level and try to understand each family and each member in the family. And we try to understand the dynamics within the family and how they interact. At the same time, we do it in a group setting where each person shares their own stories, and then they realize, oh, I'm not alone. You know, I'm not the only one who's going through this, and everyone else is going through that. And as professionals, we really don't have a lived experience, whereas in group therapy, others who have a lived experience, when they share, gives suggestions and ideas for the others, and that actually helps far more than our individual one-on-one interventions.
I love that you've mentioned that in one family you can have multiple mental illnesses and conditions coexisting, because I think sometimes in what I've seen, at least in households, is when you kind of isolate that one person who's got, say, an anxiety disorder or depression, and try to rally around them to help them without acknowledging that other family members could have challenges themselves. So I love that whole concept, and I think that's definitely a topic that's very important for today's time, where we're all locked down in our houses and having to deal with our problems as a family, right?
That, and also the financial burden, because the cost of treatment is huge. It's not cheap. If you want good quality medications, they are expensive. Like just today I was talking to a medical rep, and he was saying, see, and we know this one particular drug is really revolutionary, it's really good. But one strip of 10 tablets costs around 270 rupees. And if that person needs a full dose of 600, we calculate around 3,000 rupees for that one tablet only per month for one person. It's not affordable to a lot of people, you know. So the cost of treatment is also another factor which families have to go through, you know. Yeah.
So I know we're over time, but I'm loving this conversation, and I know people are very engaged. So we'll go through two more questions. So I want to touch a bit on elder care, because I think that this pandemic has really hit that segment of society in a very extreme way. We've all experienced personal loss, and I think the work that you're doing around improving their quality of life, you spoke a bit about this at the top, about, you know, how you're trying to encourage people to find meaning in their life after 60, 70, 80, no matter what that age is. Can you give us some context on sort of like what are the mental health needs of elders in our society generally, from what you've seen? Because I think that often we don't know, you know, what's going on in our grandmother or grandfather's mind. What are they thinking about? What do they need? You know, sometimes we might ask them, but they won't tell us. So what is your perspective on that, and things that we should keep in mind to better support them?
So when you look at the mental health needs of an elderly, I think it's the same as any of us. I mean, for us to be happy, what gives us happiness first? What brings in that peace? The feeling of being loved, the feeling of being accepted, the feeling of you know, having that dignity of life, the feeling of wanting to be useful. So when you look at all these areas, we need to provide these to our elderlies, because right now they possibly not be able to provide it for themselves. And again, within South Asian countries, we see there's a huge migration that's happening. And like, I live in a village. I live in a beautiful village in Goa. But if I look at all my neighbors, there's just one elderly living in every home, you know. Most of the younger generation has gone overseas. So I remember I was born and brought up in Kuwait, and there was a decision whether I move to Canada or I come to India. And I said India. But my entire family is either in Canada or in US, or, you know, they're out there. So if you see here what's happening because of migration, there is a huge number of elderlies living alone or living in old age homes. So when you're talking about at a broad level, is fulfill these needs, basic human needs, give it to them. And what we do is nothing, it's not rocket science. All we do is we have a team of volunteers that will go to an old age home once or we used to do it twice a week, sing with them, play with them, dance with them, adopt them.
Yeah.
That they just look forward for those 2 days every week.
Yeah.
And that itself made a whole shift from all grumpy faces to smiling faces waiting for us.
Yeah.
Once a year we had, in Goa, they've got this carnival, which is huge. But everyone who's able can go for the carnival. And a lot of our seniors are not able. So what we decided is to have a carnival for our seniors once a year, just around the week of the carnival. So every year, around 300-400 of the seniors, we take them to this awesome location, and we give them a time of their life where they sing, they dance, regardless of they're on wheelchairs or on crutches. So these things, they feel that someone cares for them, and it brings meaning into their lives. So this is at a large universal level. Then you will have people, elderlies with mental health issues, with depression, and depression is very common. Mild cognitive impairment, where it's a precursor to dementia. So that is another area that we work with, people with dementia and people with just physical disabilities. So there it becomes more specialized interventions, and a lot of the rehabilitation work, we would do it with them. What I spoke to in rehab, we would then do specifically with them, but at all times keeping up their dignity, never making them feel that they are lesser. Like in my clinic, I tell a lot of the elderlies, why don't you go home and just draw? And they say, we are not kids, why should we draw? Or I say, do puzzles. So we are not kids. So what we do, and we tell the families, is you don't tell them to draw. You draw and ask them to help you. It's a huge shift where they feel that they are in charge and they're actually helping you to do something. One is they feel that they are helping somebody else, but they also engaging themselves into a meaningful activity. So it's very important, our communication, how we communicate with our seniors.
Yeah, one of the things, just as you were talking about all the senior, concerns, I was just thinking of my grandmother. Everything you've said right now just ticks the checkbox for me, because she lives alone in India. All my family is in Canada, US, abroad, and she's also got arthritis. So for her, mobility is really difficult, and she loves to go out, but she can't go out because there's not enough avenues or places for her to go. So I think that's a real issue. Another thing I face is also, or that I've seen, is this, there's definitely a lot of isolation that takes place with senior citizens, where we don't really, even as individuals, want to necessarily include them because you think that they won't understand. I also see a lot of comparison, frankly. Like you compare, my grandmother to somebody else's grandmother who maybe has aged differently and has different issues or a different physical or mental, conditions. So I love that your organization brings awareness to that, and I'm sure that everyone has found some insight there.
Right now with the pandemic, since we are unable to actually bring our seniors or go to our seniors, so we have started an online program. So even if your grandmother wants to join our online program, she's free to do it. So we connect with the seniors through online means, and we'll have the same games, the same sing-song, the same dance movements, and we do it with our seniors through, and we do it through basic WhatsApp video calling. So anyone who's over here who's got a senior who would like to be part of our program is free to join in.
I absolutely love that. One of the last things I wanted to ask you, so yesterday we spoke a bit about helplines, and I noticed that COOJ Goa, you've got your helpline that's also a part of the Befrienders India network, but you also have an email helpline service. Can you speak a bit about that and how that works? Who can write in? What is that about?
Yeah. So what we realize is that there are different people, there are different sets of people. Some are very comfortable on a phone, but many of them are not really comfortable talking of their problems, but they're very comfortable writing of their problems. So we have provided this email service where people can write into us at youmatterbycooj@gmail.com, YOU Matter, MATTER,
Right in the chat. Okay.
at gmail.com, and we will get back to them within 72 hours. We follow the same principles of our calls. That's anonymity, confidentiality, and we give them and provide them the emotional support that they require. Definitely, it's run by trained volunteers who are not necessarily mental health professionals, but who are trained in being empathetic and providing the emotional support what we have realized, that if a lot of people just feel understood, half their burdens are gone off. They've been able to deal with half of them, and they don't really require professional counseling. So this is what service we do provide through our email befriending. And yes, and then subsequently, as they gain more trust in us, some of them feel more comfortable to actually pick up the phone and call us.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I know we're well above outside of the time that we had, but thank you so much. You've been so generous with your insight, and I personally have learned so much. I wonder if you have any, other things that you want to share about maybe an active program that COOJ is doing right now, or if there are people who are watching who are interested in volunteering.
This weekend, we are having a 2-day symposium on demystifying schizophrenia.
Love
24th,
it. Okay.
that's Monday. Monday is the World Schizophrenia Awareness Day. And over the years, we've been trying out various activities. We've actually had a sports day for people with mental illness for the last few years. We had cricket tournaments and different types of tournaments that we've had. But the last 2 years, we had to do things kind of online. And so on Saturday, Sunday, we're having this 2-day symposium with speakers from around India and some of the best institutions in mental health, people from NIMHANS, from SCARF, from Institute of Psychological Health, from the London School of Tropical Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, from COOJ, from Ashwas, from a lot of organizations from India. They'll be coming and speaking. The discussions on Sunday are going to be amazing. The first one, which is very, very important and significant in our culture, and that is marriage and mental illness. So there's going to be a debate on that.
Okay.
And the second is from very prominent speakers. And the discussion is going to be, can people with a mental illness be employed? So these are two very important discussions and debates. It's going to happen on Sunday. On Saturday, we're going to take you through a journey of understanding suicide in schizophrenia, understanding whether it is genetics, whether it's inheritable, whether people with schizophrenia really need to take the vaccine for COVID. Addictions in schizophrenia, how do you communicate with someone with schizophrenia with a mental illness? Music therapy, and one more topic which has gone off my mind. Yes, so we're going to have 6 topics.
Like fantastic programming. Some of those topics I'm just thinking like, wow, I'm definitely going to join in, and it's virtual, so I'm sure we can all join in regardless of where we are.
You can share it with you. Chrissy will kind of send you the brochure and then share it with everyone. That would be fantastic. It's a free online symposium, so you don't have to pay for it either.
Awesome. I know I for some reason I'm unable to see comments right now on my phone, but I do see a few questions. So if you have like 5 more minutes, are you happy to take them, Doctor?
I have time, yes.
Okay, perfect. So let's go through. We've got one question from Hitesh. What are all the healthy habits that can help us to get over the anxiety, fear of uncertainty, sadness without reason? Like, are there any tactical things we can do when we're feeling a moment of, anxiety or negative emotions to sort of conquer that in that moment? Any practical sort of advice there?
So a lot of our anxiety stems from our thoughts, and it is readjusting these thoughts to think of it more in a positive light can actually help to downsize the anxiety. For instance, if so that is one, readjusting your thoughts. The second thing is, if the thoughts overwhelm you and you're not able to kind of have a conversation with these thoughts and say, and rationalize with these thoughts, then the best thing to do is just say, stop, get out. Divert your mind onto something else, and don't make these thoughts overpower you. You overpower them. So how do you do it? Is either call a friend, talk about something else, talk about something fun, keep in touch with positive people, or sing a song, play something which really which connects with you. Or even if that doesn't work, start breathing. Deep breathing sometimes helps to center yourself and to get your mind off your thoughts, but into a calm place.
Yeah.
Another tactic that helps is actually using a rubber band on your wrist. Yeah, you just place a rubber band on your wrist and you pull it. So what happens? The focus goes onto the pain that's created there, and it takes you off from what you're thinking. So that is a technical method, and it does work, and especially if there are recurrent thoughts which are causing this fear. Now, to deal with the fear and the uncertainty of life and whether we're going to live or die or what it is, So again, we need to be mindful of the present moment. Maybe people are dying around, but I am okay.
Yeah.
I am okay. So just be grateful for that you are okay, your mind is okay, your head, and do whatever you can do to keep yourself safe. Beyond that, it's really not in your control. Just do what is in control, and everything else you just leave it to destiny. And be grateful and enjoy what you have,
for sure.
Rather than thinking of what might be the consequences. Just be grounded and rooted in what you have right now. Mindfulness practices really help big time. Again, I said I live in a village, so I go into my balcony in the morning and I just listen to the birds, and it's so very relaxing. I tell you. Just close and listen to the birds, and you will begin to hear birds that you never ever heard in your life when you're actually hearing them every day. So
I think for me as well, gratitude has been like the single biggest change in my life. Just getting into the habit of journaling, writing down in the morning 3 things that I'm really grateful for in my life. It's just really helped me, especially during these times, find a grounding and sense of sort of reality.
Vishala, again, I think what you have done is another huge thing which I think everyone needs to learn, that you have found meaning and purpose in your life by starting the Jugaad community.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So, this is what I would like to tell others, Trishal has given us an idea, I would say. Idea is a very small word. It should be a bigger word. But, find meaning into your life, find meaning from the rut. So don't grumble. From that mess, pick up something, and work on that. And that will bring purpose and meaning into your life. And then you will never feel anxious. There wouldn't be something uncertain in your life anymore,
Yeah.
So I think that's something which you have actually taught all of us, Rishala. So thank you.
I think I keep telling my family and friends that Jugaad for me has helped me more than it's helped anyone else in terms of how helpful I found the content and just engaging myself in something that I know is helping other people. So yeah, we have a question here, which I would love to ask you. So people with mental health or mental illness, they might not necessarily know they have it. And then if they have an issue that they need to acknowledge, they might not accept that they need treatment. So how do you convince someone that you love or that you know is struggling to actually go and seek treatment, whether that's, even as going to calling a helpline, or if it's attending a rehab program or therapy? How do you do that without sort of asserting your opinion on them or what you think they should do?
This is a tough question.
Yeah.
It's a very good question. It's a very big question. So I would put it in different levels. And see, at the basic level, I would say what we need to do is first listen to people. When we listen to people, they feel, rather than just pushing your ideas onto someone, say, you have depression, I think you need to go to a psychiatrist. What are you sitting over there? You're just lazing the whole day and this is not right and you have a problem. Oh gosh, that person is going to feel so targeted. He's never going to listen to you.
Yeah.
So if you want someone to listen to you, first he needs to take you seriously.
Yeah.
And to take you seriously, he needs to know that you're on his side.
Yeah.
That you care for him, you love him, you are with this person, and when he feels that connection, then whatever advice you give him will come from a place of concern and care. He will know that you're not trying to put him down, but you're really being concerned, and that is very important. So I'll give you an example, and it's something which is very difficult, just as which a lot of people do wrong, but just using the right technique can actually make the whole thing right. So if you have someone with an alcoholism problem, now most spouses would say, come on, why are you drinking? You should not drink. You're destroying the whole family, and the money is going, and you're causing chaos at home. The kids can't study, and blah, 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 blah. And it's constant. And then on that grumbling, they say, come on, tomorrow we're going to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
So that feels so targeted that whole doctor thing is part of her grumbling, and part of her target. He's going to say, no, we are not going to go to the doctor. But if you approach it differently and you say, okay, you know what, I really know that you already, I already know that you have a problem.
Yeah.
I already know that you know you have a problem. Okay. And I see it because there are times in your drinking pattern, what we have observed is that where you do not drink. Yeah. There are days when you do not drink. And what is the reason why you do not drink? And he'd only say, those are the times when I think that I'm never going to drink again, because I know it's affecting my family. I know it is causing a burden. Whatever my wife says actually is true, but I just can't stop. And then he says, okay, so what I understand is that you want to stop drinking, but you can't stop. So that is your struggle. Your struggle is between wanting to stop and not being able to stop. But what if we take you to someone who is possibly trained to understand this and to help you? Would you like to go? Say, yeah, I would love to go. So if that's what you
get with curiosity versus blame or judgment.
Exactly. And you need to put yourself in his shoes. You need to see life from his perspective and approach from there, and he will definitely listen to you. Now, this is in one level. But then on the other hand, you have people with psychosis. Yeah. Where actually they have illusions, where they believe that you are the enemy, and they actually believe it in full force. So that's when sometimes it can get a little bit more tougher, and that's where sometimes, again, we need to use tact in helping him to come to a professional. Yeah. But sometimes in my work as a psychiatrist and an adult psychiatrist, I have to use force. Yeah. Sometimes we have to call in the cops, and we have to literally, because that person has no insight, absolutely. So that's when we have to actually bring in the cops, and there are legal there are laws which allow us to do this when the person absolutely has no insight and is not able to fend for himself or even understand that he needs treatment. That's when it is an acute psychosis. But generally, I think empathy works, putting yourself in their shoes, showing them you're not the enemy. But it all depends on how we approach it.
Yeah. Oh, doctor, this is like an overwhelming number of questions coming my way. So I think we're going to have to probably do many more of these lives in the future so we can cover all of these topics. I just want to thank you for, all the time that you've given us. Unfortunately, we can't go through any more because I know we're beyond time and some of these are really big questions, but that just means that we're going to have to get you back on Jugaad Community Doctor to do a live again. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the meaningful work you're doing. I know though you're focused in Goa and that's where your center and your programs are, I definitely think your impact is much larger than that and very global in nature. So I'm happy to support your work. If anyone's interested to follow the programs, the events, there's a lot of community outreach work that COOJ does as well. Definitely feel free to follow their social. I'll post that on our page and you can go from there. But thank you so much. I'm so glad we connected and that I saw your NGO on Deepika Padukone's verified list. It's definitely made me a better person and I've learned a lot. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Awesome. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.